wind howls across the desolate moors of ancient Ireland on the eve of All Hallows, carrying the whispers of the damned and the forgotten souls who wander the earth looking for warmth. In modern times, residents across the United States place glowing pumpkins on their porches to ward off these spirits. But few know the terrifying reality behind this tradition. It is not merely a festive decoration for children, but a grim warning sign born from a tale of deception and eternal damnation. The flickering light inside the hollow gourd represents a soul-denied entry to both the kingdom of light and the pit of darkness. This is the story of a man who thought he could outsmart the devil himself and paid the ultimate price. The legend begins not with a pumpkin, but with a hollowed turnip and a burning coal from the fires of the underworld. To understand the true horror of the Jack of the Lantern, one must look back to the mist-shrouded villages of 17th century Ireland, where folklore was as real as the stone walls lining the fields. It was a time when the veil between the living and the dead was believed to be incredibly thin, especially during the ancient festival of Samhain. The nights were pitch black without the comfort of modern streetlights, and the superstitious locals locked their doors tight against the roaming spirits. In this world of shadows and fear lived a man whose reputation was as dark as the bogs that surrounded his home. His name was Stingy Jack, and he was a figure of local infamy known throughout the county for his manipulative nature and his insatiable thirst for strong alcohol and trouble. Stingy Jack was not merely a drunkard, but a man of profound malice who took pleasure in swindling his neighbors and friends out of their hard-earned money. He was a blacksmith by trade in some tellings, but his true vocation was deceit, and he wandered the countryside looking for his next victim. His moniker was well earned, for he would never spend a coin of his own if he could trick another into paying his way at the local tavern. The villagers learned to avoid his gaze, for an encounter with Jack meant losing one's purse or one's dignity in a game of chance. He was a man with no moral compass, a lost soul wandering through life, with a heart made of stone and a mind sharp enough to cut through the truth. The local priest would often warn Jack that his wicked ways would eventually attract the attention of dark forces that roamed the earth looking for sinners. Jack would simply laugh and take another swig of his ale, claiming that he was cleverer than any demon or angel in existence. His arrogance was boundless, and he truly believed that his wit could liberate him from any consequence, no matter how dire the circumstances might be. This hubris would prove to be his undoing, for the forces of darkness are always listening to those who boast of their immunity to judgment. It was on a cold and foggy night in late October that the warnings of the priest finally came to pass in a most terrifying manner. As Jack stumbled down a cobblestone road after a long night of drinking, he felt a sudden drop in temperature that chilled him to his very bones. The mist thickened around him, swirling in unnatural patterns, and the sounds of the night insects fell deeply silent. Out of the shadows stepped a figure draped in darkness, whose presence radiated a malevolence older than time itself. It was the devil himself, who had come to collect the soul of the man, whose wickedness had become legendary even in the pits of hell. Most men would have fallen to their knees and begged for mercy, but Stingy Jack was not like most men, even in the face of his own doom. His cunning mind began to race, looking for an angle to exploit. The devil towered over Jack with eyes like burning coals and a smile that promised eternal torment for the blacksmith's wicked soul. He informed Jack that his time on earth was finished and that he must descend immediately into the fiery abyss. Jack feigned resignation and nodded slowly, pretending to accept his fate with a heavy heart. He asked the Dark Lord for one final request before they departed for the underworld. Jack pleaded for one last drink of ale to quench his thirst before facing the eternal flames. The devil, finding the request amusing and harmless, agreed to visit the nearest tavern to allow the sinner his final earthly pleasure. They entered the dim interior of a roadside pub, where the patrons were too drunk or too tired to notice the sinister companion at Jack's side. Jack drank his ale with relish, savoring the bitter taste of the brew, while the devil waited impatiently by the door. When the time came to pay the tab, Jack revealed his empty pockets and turned to the devil with a sly grin on his face. He suggested that the devil transform himself into a silver coin to pay the bartender, reasoning that he could change back once the transaction was complete. The devil, impressed by the audacity of the mortal, agreed and instantly morphed his form into a shiny sixpence. This was the moment Stingy Jack had been waiting for, and he moved with the speed of a striking viper. He snatched the silver coin from the table and shoved it deep into his pocket next to a small silver cross he had stolen earlier. The holy presence of the cross paralyzed the devil, preventing him from shifting back into his original demonic form. The Lord of Darkness was now trapped in the pocket of a drunkard powerless and raging against the holy metal burning his essence. Jack smiled, patting his pocket, and began to negotiate with the trapped entity. He told the devil that he would only release him if he promised to leave Jack alone for 1 full year. The devil had no choice but to agree to the terms, for the pain of being near the silver cross was unbearable for his dark spirit. He swore a binding oath to spare Jack for 12 months and to ensure that no harm would come to him during that time. Satisfied with the deal, Jack removed the coin from his pocket and tossed it onto the ground. The coin exploded into a cloud of sulphurous smoke, and the devil reappeared in his terrifying form, glaring at the blacksmith with pure hatred. With a a swirl of his dark cloak, he vanished into the night, leaving Jack alone on the road. Jack laughed into the darkness, believing he had won the greatest gamble of his life. For the next year, Stingy Jack continued his wicked ways with even more reckless abandon. Then, before knowing he was temporarily safe from hell, he drank and gambled and cheated his neighbors without a single shred of remorse for his actions or his near miss with damnation. The villagers whispered that Jack had made a pact with evil powers, for his luck seemed unnatural, and his demeanor grew increasingly dark. He neglected his health and his home, allowing everything around him to decay while he wallowed in his vices. The year passed quickly like sand, slipping through an hourglass. And soon the anniversary of his dark deal arrived with the chilling winds of autumn. On the exact date the truce expired, the devil returned to claim what was rightfully his, appearing before Jack on a lonely country lane. The demon looked even more fearsome than before, his patience worn thin by the humiliation of their previous encounter. He demanded that Jack come with him immediately to the underworld to begin his eternal punishment. Jack looked at the devil and once again feigned acceptance, appearing tired and weary from his year of debauchery. However, as they walked past an old gnarled apple tree, Jack paused and looked up at the ripe fruit hanging from the high branches. Jack turned to the devil and mentioned that his throat was parched, and that one of those apples would be a delicious final meal. He lamented that he was too old and weak to climb the tree himself, and asked the devil to fetch one for him. The devil, thinking that climbing a tree was a small price to pay to finally secure this annoying soul, agreed. He leaped up into the branches with supernatural agility, searching for the finest apple to satisfy the condemned man. While the devil was high in the branches, picking the fruit, Jack acted quickly, pulling a knife from his belt. With frantic desperation, Jack carved a rough sign of the cross into the bark of the tree trunk just below the lowest branch. The holy symbol once again acted as an impenetrable barrier for the entity of pure evil trapped in the tree. The devil roared in fury, realizing that he had been tricked by the same mortal for a second time. He could not descend past the carved cross and was forced to cling to the high branches like a frightened cat. Jack stood at the base of the tree, looking up with a smug expression of triumph. He knew he had the upper hand and prepared to make his final and most ambitious demand. Jack shouted up to the trapped demon that he would only remove the symbol if the devil swore a new and permanent oath. He demanded that the devil promise never to take his soul to hell and to leave him alone for the rest of his earthly life. The devil, furious and humiliated, had no other option but to agree to these outrageous terms to regain his freedom. He swore by the fires of the pit that he would never claim the soul of Stingy Jack, no matter when or how he died. Satisfied with this eternal guarantee, Jack used his knife to scratch away the carving of the cross. The devil descended from the tree, his eyes burning with a cold and calculating malice that Jack failed to fully appreciate in his arrogance. The Dark Lord vanished without a word, leaving the air filled with the scent of sulfur and impending doom. Jack walked away from the apple tree, believing he had achieved the ultimate victory over death and damnation. He spent the remaining years of his life in a drunken stupor, confident that he had cheated the system. However, time is a relentless hunter, and the toll of his lifestyle eventually caught up with the blacksmith. His body gave out, and Stingy Jack finally died, leaving the mortal world behind. Jack's spirit ascended toward the golden gates of heaven, expecting perhaps to talk his way in, as he had done with everything else. He stood before Saint Peter, who guarded the entrance to paradise, and recounted his life story with a few embellishments. But Saint Peter was not a foolish demon or a drunkard in a tavern, and he saw clearly into the blackened heart of the man. He listed the sins of Stingy Jack, which were numerous and weighed heavily against any chance of redemption. Deceit and greed and selfishness defined his existence, and there was no place for such a soul in the kingdom of light. Saint Peter denied him entry, banning him from the clouds and the peace of the afterlife with a stern and final judgment. Jack turned away from the light, feeling a pang of fear for the first time since his death. He realized that heaven was closed to him, but he comforted himself with the thought of his deal with the devil. If he could not go to heaven, he would at least find a place in hell where he might be treated with some respect for outsmarting the boss. He began the long descent into the darkness, traveling toward the gates of the underworld. He arrived at the massive iron gates of hell, where the devil stood waiting with a look of mock surprise on his face. Jack approached confidently and asked to be let in, assuming that the devil would welcome him into the fold. But the devil stopped him at the threshold and reminded Jack of the binding promise made under the apple tree years ago. The oath was that the devil would never take his soul into hell, and the devil intended to keep his word. Jack was stunned, realizing the horrific implication of the deal he had fought so hard to secure. He pleaded with the devil, crying out that he had nowhere else to go, and that he could not wander the void forever. He begged to be let into the fire, preferring eternal torture to the emptiness of nothingness. The devil simply laughed, a sound that echoed through the caverns of the damned, and shook his head. He told Jack that he was the master of his own fate, and that he had crafted this specific doom with his own hands. The gates of hell were slammed shut in his face and locked tight, leaving Jack standing in absolute darkness. The darkness around him was suffocating, and cold a void where the wind screamed and the shadows moved like living things. Jack cried out that he could not see where he was going, and that he would be lost in the abyss. In a final gesture of mocking pity, the devil reached through the bars of the gate and scooped up a single burning coal from the fires of hell. He tossed the glowing ember to Jack, telling him to use it to find his own way back to where he came from. It was a cruel gift, a piece of the hell he was denied that would burn forever, but offer no warmth. Jack caught the burning coal, but it was too hot to hold in his bare spirit hands without searing pain. He looked around desperately for something to carry it in, and found a hollowed-out turnip that he had been eating before he died. He placed the glowing ember inside the root vegetable, which acted as a makeshift lantern, shielding the flame from the wind. The light from the coal cast an eerie green glow through the walls of the turnip, illuminating the mist around him. With his lantern in hand, Stingy Jack turned away from the gates of hell and began his eternal wander. He was condemned to roam the earth for all eternity, belonging neither to heaven nor to hell, a true orphan of the spiritual world. He drifted back to the Irish countryside, wandering the dark roads and the treacherous bogs at night. The locals began to see strange lights bobbing in the distance over the marshes and the fields. They would see a flickering flame that seemed to move with intelligence, vanishing when approached and reappearing further away. They called this terrifying apparition Jack of the Lantern, or simply Jack O' Lantern. The sight of the wandering light struck fear into the hearts of the Irish people, who knew the legend of the blacksmith. To protect themselves and their homes from this wandering evil, they began a ritual of their own. On All Hallows Eve, when the spirits were most active, they would carve faces into turnips and potatoes. They placed burning candles inside these carved vegetables and set them in their windows and on their doorsteps. The grotesque faces were intended to scare away Stingy Jack and other malevolent spirits that might be roaming the night. The tradition of carving root vegetables became deeply ingrained in the culture of Ireland and Scotland and parts of England. It was a way to exert control over the unknown and to protect the family unit from the encroaching darkness of winter. Children would carry these lanterns through the streets, protecting themselves as they went from house to house. The practice was serious and steeped in the genuine fear of the supernatural entities that governed the old world. But history was about to take a turn that would bring this legend across the ocean to a new land. In the 19th century, a devastating potato famine struck Ireland, forcing millions of people to flee their homeland for survival. They boarded crowded ships bound for the United States, bringing with them their few belongings and their rich folklore. Among the stories they carried across the Atlantic was the tale of Stingy Jack and the protective ritual of the carved lantern. When these immigrants arrived in America, they found a landscape that was vast and different from the moors of home. They also found a native plant that would change their tradition forever. The pumpkin was native to the Americas and was far larger and easier to carve than the turnips and potatoes of Europe. The Irish immigrants quickly realized that this orange gourd was the perfect vessel for their Halloween lanterns. The soft flesh yielded easily to the knife, and the large interior could hold a brighter candle than the small root vegetables. The Jack-o'-lantern, as we know it today, was born from this marriage of ancient Celtic folklore and American agriculture. The frightening faces remained, but the medium had shifted to the iconic orange pumpkin. As the decades passed, the terrifying origin of the tradition began to fade from the collective memory of the general public. The grim story of a soul trapped between heaven and hell was replaced by commercialized images of smiling pumpkins and candy corn. The ritual lost its protective purpose and became a playful activity for families and children during the autumn season. However, the core of the legend remains hidden beneath the surface of the celebration, waiting to be rediscovered. Every carved pumpkin is a tribute to the eternal wandering of a man who tricked the devil. Even today, in the rural parts of Ireland and Appalachia, there are those who still believe in the wandering lights of the marsh. They warn travelers not to follow the flickering beacons that appear in the distance on foggy nights. These lights, known as will-o'-the-wisps, are said to be Stingy Jack, trying to lead unwary souls to their doom. He seeks company in his eternal loneliness, hoping to trick others into joining him in the void. The legend serves as a reminder that arrogance and greed can lead to a fate worse than death itself. The atmosphere of Halloween night is still charged with a special kind of energy that harkens back to these old beliefs. When the wind rustles the dry leaves and the shadows lengthen, it is easy to imagine the figure of Jack roaming the streets. The glowing eyes of the pumpkins on the porch seem to watch the passers-by with a silent judgment. They are the sentinels of the night, guarding the threshold against the spirits that envy the warmth of the living. It is a night when the boundaries are tested, and the old stories feel frighteningly real. So the next time you pick up a knife to carve a pumpkin, remember the man who walks in the shadows. Remember that the light you are creating is a mimic of the coal thrown from the fires of hell. You are participating in a ritual that spans centuries and continents, rooted in the fear of the dark and the unknown. You are keeping the legend of Stingy Jack alive, fueling the story that grants him a form of immortality. And perhaps, if you look closely enough into the darkness, beyond the candle flame, you might see him. Stingy Jack is out there, still wandering the earth with his turnip lantern, looking for a place to rest his weary soul. He is the ghost story that refuses to die, the warning that echoes through the ages. As the candle in your pumpkin burns down to a nub and the light flickers and dies, remember him. He is the eternal wanderer, the master of deceit, and the king of the pumpkin patch. And on Halloween night, he is closer than you think, waiting for the moment the lights go out.